Hi, Andrew. That's a great question. I think both play crucial roles, but maybe not in the same way we often think they do. How do you feel about them?
Well, for me, discipline seems like something more rigid and strict, like forcing yourself to stick to a plan even when you're not feeling motivated. But motivation feels more spontaneous, like that burst of energy when you just want to get things done.
Exactly. And it's true that they often go hand in hand, but also can work independently at times. For instance, discipline helps you create habits and stick to routines, while motivation is the spark that keeps you going, even when the routine isn't as exciting anymore.
That's a good point. I feel like sometimes I set goals for myself, and then I get into this rut where I just keep doing the same thing day after day without much excitement. Is there a way to use discipline to maintain that initial motivation?
Absolutely. One strategy is to break down your big goals into smaller, manageable tasks with specific deadlines. This can help you stay on track and feel like you're making progress, which in turn keeps the motivation high.
Makes sense. But what about when I just don't feel motivated at all? Is there a point where discipline should take over?
That's a tricky one. Sometimes we do need to push through those moments, but it's important not to beat yourself up if you're having days where motivation is lacking. Discipline in these cases can be about doing the bare minimum or something small that still keeps the ball rolling.
I like that idea of discipline as a safety net. But how do we balance it with just letting ourselves relax and recharge?
Great question. Flexibility is key here. Discipline helps you stay consistent, but too much rigidity can lead to burnout. So, it's important to find that sweet spot where you're consistently moving forward without overexerting yourself.
Yeah, I think finding the balance between the two is crucial. Any tips on how we can encourage ourselves more naturally?
Sure. Setting up small rewards for achieving your goals can be a great motivator. And don't forget to celebrate those wins, no matter how small they might seem. It helps keep that positive reinforcement going.
That's really helpful advice. I think sometimes I just need to remember to enjoy the process and not get too caught up in perfectionism.
Absolutely. Enjoying the journey is a huge part of it. And remember, motivation ebbs and flows. Discipline can help you keep moving forward even when you're not feeling super motivated.
Thanks for breaking that down with me, Ava. It's really helped clarify things.
Anytime, Andrew. If you have any more questions or want to chat about this further, feel free to reach out.
Hey, Ava. Thanks for joining me today. I wanted to really dig into something I've been wrestling with lately, this whole thing about motivation versus discipline. It feels like everyone talks about motivation, and that's fantastic, but it's so fleeting, isn't it?
Absolutely, Andrew. It's like chasing a butterfly. You grab for it and it's gone. I think the conversation often defaults to just be motivated, but that's such a shallow answer. It's rarely sustainable, really. What's your take on how they compare?
Well, for me, I've started to see discipline as the bedrock. Motivation is a fantastic spark, but discipline is what keeps the flame going even when you don't feel like it. Like I might be motivated to go to the gym, but discipline is actually showing up, even when I'm exhausted or Netflix is calling my name.
That's brilliant put. It's less about an initial burst of energy and more about building systems. I think a lot of people confuse the two. They set a huge goal and then, when the initial excitement fades, they abandon it completely. Discipline, for me, is about breaking that goal down into tiny, manageable steps.
Exactly. It's about creating habits, right? Those little things you do consistently that build up over time. Like, instead of I'm going to write a novel, it's I'm going to write for 30 minutes every day. The motivation is the idea of the novel, and discipline is the consistent action.
And that's where it gets really interesting. I've found that cultivating discipline actually boosts motivation because you're seeing tangible progress, even if it's small. It's like a positive feedback loop. Small wins equal more motivation.
Totally. It's almost like discipline starts to feel good. You develop a sense of accomplishment, and that builds momentum. I remember reading about Navy SEAL training. They emphasize discipline above all else.
It's a really powerful analogy. Think about learning a musical instrument. You don't just pick up the guitar and suddenly become a virtuoso, do you? It takes consistent practice, even when your fingers hurt and you miss a chord.
Right? And it's about respecting your own process. Sometimes you'll have amazing days, and sometimes you'll struggle. Discipline isn't about beating yourself up when you slip up. It's about getting back on track immediately.
That's crucial. Self-compassion is a huge part of it. I've definitely had days where I've completely derailed my plans. Instead of feeling like a failure, I've shifted my focus to what I can do today to get back on course.
So it's not about perfection, it's about consistent effort, even imperfect effort. I think the common mistake is tying motivation too tightly to the outcome. If you're too focused on the result, writing the novel, losing the weight, you'll lose the motivation when the path gets tough.
Precisely. And I think the long-term success stems from enjoying the process itself. When you're genuinely enjoying the journey, the motivation will naturally follow. It's about intrinsic motivation, fueled by the small victories and the sense of control that discipline provides.
That makes so much sense. It's almost like discipline is the art of creating your own motivation. You're not relying on some external force. You're building it from within.
Absolutely. And it's a skill you can learn and develop. It's not something you're born with, although some people definitely have a natural inclination toward it. It's about building that muscle through habit and self-awareness.
Wow, that's a really insightful way to put it. I think I've been operating under this assumption that motivation was the key, and you've completely shifted my perspective. Thank you, Ava.
You're very welcome, Andrew. I think this is a conversation everyone can benefit from having.
I've always been curious about people's approaches to productivity. What do you think is more effective, discipline or motivation?
Well, for me, it starts with understanding that they're not mutually exclusive. In fact, a combination of both can lead to better results.
That makes sense, but what about when motivation comes and goes? How do we maintain discipline in those moments?
It's all about setting clear goals and tracking progress. When you see how far you've come, your motivation tends to kick back in.
That's a great point. I think many people get caught up in the excitement of starting something new, but struggle to keep it going.
Exactly. It's easy to get distracted or lose sight of what's important when you're not feeling motivated. But once you establish a routine and systems in place, motivation starts to follow naturally.
I've heard that intrinsic motivation can be more powerful than extrinsic rewards. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. When you're doing something because it aligns with your values or passions, you're much more likely to stick with it.
That makes sense. But what about when we're not feeling motivated? How do we tap into our internal drive?
For me, it's about reframing my mindset around motivation. Instead of seeing it as something that's going to magically appear, I focus on building habits and skills that will support my goals.
I like that approach. What about accountability? Do you think having someone to report to or be accountable to is important?
Definitely. Having a community or partner who's also working towards similar goals can be a huge motivator.
That's interesting. In today's world, where everyone's always connected and visible on social media, it feels like we're constantly comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's also an opportunity for us to focus on our own unique struggles and challenges. Rather than trying to keep up with someone else, we can use those comparisons as a chance to learn from each other's successes and failures.
So, it's not about comparing ourselves to others, but rather using their experiences as inspiration?
Exactly. And ultimately, I think discipline and motivation are both important for achieving our goals. But if you're someone who struggles with motivation, don't give up on discipline just yet.
That's a great point. Maybe we can say that discipline is the foundation, and motivation is what propels us forward.
I like that way of thinking about it. And at the end of the day, it's all about finding what works best for each individual and adapting as needed.